But yeah, stay tuned. We now have Nana Parry joining us. Hey Nana, how's it going?
I'm good, Kofi. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Lovely to have you join us. I was saying before how you're such a valuable member of the community. You've done stuff for us for the FoundersDoor Pre-Accelerator and other things. So yeah, really happy to have you here. Do you want to do like a really brief intro?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, hey everyone, thanks for joining. I am Nana Parry. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Tectonic. And what we do is we help businesses understand the needs of their customers. And we do that through collecting different data points and analyzing that data to validate new concepts or help grow sales. I'm here today because I've raised investment from multiple investors. And basically, I've tried to create a process that really helps me if I decide to embark on going on the journey of investing again, a step-by-step process really, and some mindset changes that really helped me. So I'm here to kind of share that with you, and hopefully if you aren't in a position where you know investors already, you'll be able to find some and get some money from them to grow your businesses.
Great, thank you. Okay, cool. So without further ado, Nana, sorry. Feel free to like share your screen and kick off.
Yeah, I'm going to do that. Let me just do the desktop actually. Hopefully you can see. You can all see that?
Yeah, all good.
Okay, cool, awesome. So I'll go straight into it because there's a lot to get through, but I think I've kind of introduced myself already, so I won't go into a lot of detail there. A little brief around what angel investing is. I'm sure a lot of you know that already, but the really important stuff, which is what mindset changes did I have to go through when I was starting my process of investing, of gaining investment, and also the actual step-by-step process that I take when I have decided I'm going to try and raise money. And a little bit on valuing the company, which is a whole section in itself, but I'll try and give a bit of information there as well. As I kind of mentioned, I'm the co-founder of Tectonic. We help companies understand the true needs of their customers and validate new concepts. And the way that we do that is we do customer interviews. So we find the target customer, we ask them some specific questions and get those insights and present them to the company. We also do bespoke surveys in 46 countries around the world. And then we also help businesses embed customer insights into their decision making. As I think Andy Ayim said before he left, one of the key reasons we've been able to bootstrap and raise money is because we have a really deep understanding of our customers. So we help companies do that too. And the reason I'm here, I'm not claiming to be the guru of raising investment at all, but I just think you often hear from investors as into how they deploy cash, but you don't often hear from founders who have raised money and have done it in a structured way. So I'm here to kind of present that. And, I haven't done millions. It's been in the early hundreds of thousands. But I've raised from 12 investors, 305K, and I approximately get 5 no's for every yes. So that's just to put it in context, even though I've raised this what we would say small amount of money to some people, large to others. Most of the time I'm getting no's, and that's just the way it is most of the time. And the minimum I've raised is 4,000 from an individual, and the most I've raised is 100,000, and different aspects at different points in between. Okay, so briefly, what is angel investment? So it's really an individual who invests their own money in an entrepreneurial company in exchange for shares in that company. And the reason it's important to kind of have this definition is because sometimes we think that angel investors are, they have to have the title angel investor to be an investor. Some of the people I raised money from were investors and had invest multiple times a year. Others were professionals who had some spare capital that they wanted to invest in different things. They obviously have a pension and things like that, but they wanted to diversify their investment portfolio. So I think it's important to show that distinction. And where I predominantly have operated has been in this kind of pre-seed or seed stage. So, you've got an idea or you've got an early product with some initial customers, maybe a bit of revenue. And what you want to do is, raise a certain amount of money to kind of scale the business or bring on a team member, etc. I haven't done kind of Series A plus, so in the millions. So this is very much in those early stages. Okay, so what are the reasons to raise investment? There are many reasons. I think the important reason is to understand for yourselves what's your actual reason for doing it. Are you playing into the rhetoric that you must raise money? I think as Esma said before, you know, you don't have to. There's no, it very much depends on the type of business that you're running. But you know, what is your why for raising investment? Is it, you know, to validate the idea? You know, I put a question mark there because the market has moved on in terms of investment, and it is harder to get investment when you haven't got proof points. You know, it's still something that can happen, but it is more difficult. Is it to build your initial product? Is it to acquire your first customers? Maybe you've got a very technical product, or you need to spend money on legal fees. Whatever those reasons are, it's very important that you categorically understand them, because you're going to need to build that into your process. And then there's this concept of smart money versus less smart money, or sometimes called dumb money. I think there's a place for both. Smart money is effectively investors that aren't just providing you cash, they're also adding further value to your business, either because they're domain experts or they can open up certain networks for you. But then there's less smart money, which is, this is just cold hard cash. You know, update me when you've got something to tell me, or update me regularly. But it's less about them actively being involved in the business and trying to push the business forward with you. And I think there's a place for both. Obviously, ideally, you would get only smart money, but we have to be realistic about what's available at the time as well. So I think an important part is to understand, why do investors actually invest? And these are the, you know, the reasons that people have invested in me, and invested in some people that I know as well. So it could be that they're just a high risk, high reward type of person. They could be domain experts or passionate about the sector that you're in. It could be around tax incentives like SEIS or IES, which I'll mention briefly later. It could literally be the fear of missing out. That has definitely been something that's happened to me with investors as well. And lots of different reasons. I think there's a duplicate there, but really and truly that bottom one, that's really been the overarching reason for me, is that they trust you. They trust that you're going to be the person to be able to make this thing happen and overcome the barriers. And they actually like you as an individual. If you're going to give someone your money, you're going to want to make sure that you actually, you know, think they're a decent person. I have put a point to have questions right now. What I'll do is I'll probably skip, and then I'll do another question and a Q&A section later. So some of the things that I had to do to get me in the right mindset, because I was of the view that, okay, I'm going to need to find these multi-millionaires who will then, you know, be able to give me £500,000. It's no skin off their nose. That was my thinking at the time. But as I kind of mentioned before, one of the key mindset changes was you don't have to raise investment. And the attitude change that I made here was that if I go in thinking, okay, it's not the end of the world if I don't raise X amount by X date. As it was mentioned, customers are your best route to getting cash into the business. So I decided to say to myself, if I don't raise money, I'll be able to find another way of achieving my goals. So it reduced the pressure on me. Second one, this was a big revelation for me. I was of the view that the best ideas get funded. Meaning if it was me and another business and their idea was better, their market was bigger, their opportunity was bigger, their metrics were better, then they would get funded over me. However, the reality that I found in my experience has been that the best salespeople get funded. And I don't mean sales in terms of having, you know, being an extrovert and being very salesy in your decorum, but more so that understanding who your customer is. And in this situation, your customer is the investor. The investor is buying shares from you. So you have to make sure that your shares, you communicate that your shares are of value. And understanding that mindset of this is actually a sales-led approach, rather than it being the best idea, really helped me as well. At this early stage when raising investment, one thing that I found is that it's more art than science. And again, what I mean by that is we are often told that, for example, the pitch deck is what gets you investment. And I'll come onto that later. The pitch deck is important, but actually a lot of the softer skills, in my experience, are required to raise money at this early stage, because it is a risky stage. There's no denying that you haven't got loads of customers. You haven't got, your market cornered. So it is going to be more art than the metrics and the science themselves. But obviously the metrics help. Early stage investing is basically betting. And I'm being a little bit facetious here, but as I kind of mentioned, if you think about, let's say you're betting on a football game or something, and their best player isn't playing, or the environment isn't great, there's no fans or whatever that may be, some of those things will have an effect as to whether someone decides to take on that bet or not. And because there are so many unknowns, the reason that when you get to series kind of B or later in investment, the money is much bigger and the valuation is much higher, is because many of the things that are normally unknown are known. So it's going to be more expensive for you to buy into that process. Whereas when it's earlier, there are still a lot of unknowns. So recognizing that it's not, exactly completely scientific. The pitch deck isn't as important as you might think. So the pitch deck is a very important document, don't get me wrong, but my mindset was it's an aid to getting the investment, not what gets me the investment. At the end of the day, the pitch deck is a document with figures and letters and numbers on it, but it's the reality, your communication in terms of what you're going to do with the business, and also what markets you may have already seen some evidence of having customers in. That is very, very important. So the pitch deck is not the be all and end all. And as it was said before, you might spend hours and hours and hours and hours on your pitch deck trying to perfect it. I completely agree. Have a few different versions of your pitch deck, which again, I'll come on to, but it's not the way you get money. It's not the pitch deck in itself. Another thing, angel investors are just people. They are human beings. They have friends, they have family, they have interests, they've had troubles. If you are expecting money from an investor, but something in their life happens, things happen. So it's remembering that they are individuals, they are humans, they are people, and you have to relate to them as people as well. When you're thinking about the right person to bring into your business or the right person to get cash from, we have to remember that human aspect as well. That really helped me. And it also stopped me putting them on this pedestal, like they're better than me. No one is better than anyone. We're all human beings, we're all equal. Someone might have more money than me, or someone might, have decided that I'm not the best person to invest in, and that's completely their prerogative to be able to make those decisions. But they are human beings, and we do need to relate to them. Another thing that I learned often the hard way is just because they say they are an investor, and an angel investor, really they're individuals, doesn't mean they have money to invest. So sometimes, they're not going to say, no, I don't want to invest, because they're worried that if you do become successful, or you do manage to get the investment, they can come in later, things like that. You may get messed around a bit. So I had to be really good at asking the right questions to determine, does this person actually have the 20K, 50K, 100K that I need to be able to, complete my funding round? So yeah, I think you'll eventually get really good at asking the right questions in a non-invasive way that doesn't actually mean that you're wasting your time if you really need to close a round by a certain point. Obvious one that I kind of mentioned before, but you will likely lose more than you win. And the important part is that's okay. It's not about every discussion that you have with someone resulting in money. Obviously, that would be nice. But ultimately, the truth is that you're likely going to get more no's than yeses. So going in with that mindset, in that actually, if I talk to 10 people, I'm not necessarily going to get 10 people who want to invest. And that's okay. It's just about finding the right amount of people and the right amount of cash that you need to be able to do that. Another thing, my attitude was investment is risky. We know that all types of investment are risky. They just have different risk profiles. And my way of thinking about it was, how do I reduce the risk of their investment? Basically, how do I make it really difficult for them not to see this as a great opportunity. That could mean, okay, so I know that the team is very important in the investment piece. So how do I make sure that I've got the right people and I communicate the right skill set, which will reduce the risk of the investment? How do I show that, okay, I've already made revenue and I already have customers? That reduces the risk of investment as well. And there are going to be multiple things that you can do to reduce the risk of the investment. It's understanding what those things are and trying to tick them off to make it really difficult for someone to say, okay, this is a great opportunity. And probably the final one, and the thing that worked mostly for me from a mindset perspective, is that I found that the key is trust, relationships, and confidence. So the trust bit being, you know, if I asked you to give me £100 today, some of you, most of you would likely not. A, you don't necessarily know me, you don't necessarily trust me, you don't have that relationship with me yet to feel that you have the confidence that whatever I do with that money, I'm going to put the right energy behind it. And that is not that different from how investors deploy their cash as well. At that angel stage, they're going to need to trust that, you know, you are going to use that money in the right way to make you successful, but also them successful due to the risk that they've taken. Relationships, actually being able to build something with someone to the point where you're not just trying to take their money, you're actually trying to understand this person, know this person, and, you know, be better by having them on board. And also confidence. And there's two parts of this. There's the confidence that you will make it happen, but there's also the confidence that if someone doesn't invest in you, that's not a problem. You will find either other people to invest in you, or you will find another way. So I started to go in with the attitude of, this is happening with or without you. I want you on board, but if you don't think it's the right opportunity, that's totally fine. But I need people who are fully in with the process. And that really helped me as well. Okay, so I'm not sure if this is probably a good time to stop with any questions, if there are any. If not, I'll move on. I can't see the chat, but I will maybe let's see if I can have a look here.
So Nana, there were a few questions that have come in. One of them was, and it might be something that you touch on later on, but how do you get your foot in the door to see or meet with angel investors?
Yeah.
Are they open to meeting with almost anyone that reaches out to them, or are there certain things you need to be mindful of when thinking about how you approach them?
Mm-hmm.
And there was another question on how do you decide how much equity to give away for X amount of investment?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, yeah, that first question I'm going to come on to, but very briefly, getting your foot in the door is very much, if you don't, assuming you don't have a network at all, getting your foot in the door is very much linked to understanding the background of that individual. And, you know, it could be cold messaging, it could be introductions to people, but I'll come on to some of the different ways in which you can find investors later in the deck. And hopefully that will be useful. But if another question comes up out of that, I'll be happy to answer it then. And the second part, in terms of equity to give away, that's always a difficult one. There is no hard and fast rule, but generally at the early stage, especially when you're doing your first kind of six-figure investment raise, you know, you're trying to give away as little as possible, obviously, but I would say I would generally give away between 8 and 12%, I would say, at that early stage. But the percentage matters, but it's actually a lot of the legal stuff that comes with the type of shares that you offer that really matters. So there are companies that we have founders who have minority equity shares, but they have a different share class that allows them to do X, Y, Z. So that's really what matters in that sense. But when I do it, I generally say, okay, number one, how much money do I need? That's the key thing, because that actually is what drives your valuation and how much equity are you willing to give away at that point. But I'll come on to that a little bit as well later on. Cool. I think I'll move on then. So this is me now sharing the process that I take when effectively raising money. So firstly, I start a tracker or use a customer relationship management tool or a CRM. It sounds quite basic, but one of the things that really helped me was just thinking about, okay, who do I know now that either could be an investor, which at the beginning was pretty much no one, or could be someone that could introduce me to investors. And as it was kind of mentioned before, I was part of different networks like YSYS or different groups. Who do I know or have a relationship there with that could potentially introduce me? And who do I not know that I don't have a relationship? So who do I know that I don't have a relationship with? I may know their name, but I also want to put them on this tracker as well. And it's about being really process driven for me. And, just regardless of how loose or likely it is to happen, put their names on a spreadsheet and, so you can actually start to visualize who these people are. Actually, I'll stick on this point because I thought I was going to talk about it later. But once I have all their names on the sheet, maybe their email addresses, their phone numbers, etc., what I would do is then I had a column called relationship status, which was effectively how I basically put for each name green, amber, or red. Red being I don't know this person at all. If I called them up, they're not going to know who I am. They're not going to take my call. There were those who were amber, who I may have met once or twice. There was a decent connection there, but it wasn't as, it's not as bad as red where they wouldn't pick up my call, but I would need to do a bit of work if I was to ask them for something. Not necessarily money, but just ask them for something in general. And then green, all the people who were green were people who I had a good relationship with. I could ask them questions quite directly. I could pick up the phone to them, etc. And the key thing here was I needed to move some of the key reds to green, meaning there was a gap. I had to invest time and effort into turning those people from red to green. So I would recommend, as part of the process, regardless of whether you think you know investors now, have a really good think about your network and start putting these names on a spreadsheet. Second, create a qualifying criteria. What I mean by this is you aren't necessarily going to want all types of people to invest. So maybe your qualifying criteria is they are from the industry that my business is in, or they invest at least twice a year in companies, or they're willing to invest a minimum of £10,000. Whatever that qualifying criteria may be, you want to have that visor so you know when you may need to close off a conversation and come back to it later, or you just need to know whether your qualifying criteria might be too strict and maybe you need to loosen it a bit. But going in with the mindset, again, very sales focused, but who are you trying to bring on board into your team, and what behaviors do they exhibit to be able to help you qualify some people in and out. Thirdly, build a learning system. One thing we often forget is that every interaction that we have with people, there's an opportunity to learn. And when you are either just having a coffee with someone, you haven't talked about investment yet, or you're actually pitching, you want to make sure that at the end of the meeting, you do things like write down all the questions you were asked, look at their body language and see if there were particular elements where parts of the presentation or the discussion where they seem confused. And then you start to see if there are trends when you were talking to different people. You go back to your deck, you go back to your practice pitch or your approach, and you start to learn and improve. Very much similar to how you're building your products or your services, you have to learn and improve and make it iterative. So it's building that system in. And that could mean you have a Google Doc, it could mean a sheet, it could be a pen and paper, whatever that may be. Just make sure you have a think about learning as you go. So here's some of the iterations on the findings. So as I said, whether they seem confused or drop off, what parts do they like the most? What parts do they challenge the most? If you're getting the same challenges over and over, then you may need to figure out how to navigate that later. Next one, start building relationships before you need investment. It's very, very difficult when you're under pressure to raise by X amount of time for you to start the process when you need to raise. One of the best things that I did was before I needed investment, I would find people, speak to them, not to ask for investment, but just to update them on my product or, which I'll come on to, get advice and things like that. But the key thing is you want to have an ecosystem of potential investors before you actually want to go through the process of raising. It really, really helps because, as was mentioned before, my view is very much still focus on customers, focus on generating revenue from your customers, but alongside that, build relationships with people, put some time aside to do that. So when you do need the cash, you're not starting from scratch. Create 2 pitch decks minimum. The reason I say that is because what worked for me was having a taster deck and then a main pitch deck. One thing I should mention though is every website you go on about pitch decks, someone's saying 10 slides, someone's saying 12, someone's saying doesn't matter, someone's saying 3. It's about how you tell your story and how you communicate the important parts of your business. So for me, what worked for me was that my taster deck was 3 to 5 slides. So the problem, the solution, the market, the traction, as in what, how well am I doing now? What progress have I shown? And then the team. Those are my 3 to 5 slides, depending on who I was speaking to. But I interchanged those slides depending on who I was speaking to, because part of the sales process and the sales mentality is that you need to really understand that customer stroke, that investor on the other side, to have an understanding of what do you think they will care most about. But then you obviously have your main pitch deck. This isn't a presentation about the pitch deck, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but it has a lot of the things that you may know: your problem, solution, team, investment breakdown, financials, etc. But again, you are likely to have different versions of your deck because you may want to communicate things in a different way depending on who you're speaking to. Start generating leads. So I think this comes back to the earlier question around how do you get your foot in the door? How do you find people? From a mindset perspective, I needed to realize that I need to start generating leads. So my first investor, who gave me my first 10K for a previous business, they used to work at the company that I'd left to start my own business. So because I was working in a fairly senior role, and they heard that I was leaving and they wanted to understand why I was leaving, they said, okay, that's really interesting, keep me updated. To me, that's a lead. It's not a strong lead, but it's something that I can work towards potentially. Similarly, when I found my lead investor for our previous business, it was someone told me that they heard something on the radio about a lawyer who was in the music industry. My previous business was in the music industry. And they said that, maybe just contact them and see if you can have a chat with them to see if you can get some advice. So I called the legal office, managed to get a meeting with him. I actually wanted that individual to invest, but he wasn't interested. But then I asked him if he knew anyone else that that he could connect me to. He then connected me to someone else who was a friend of his, who then connected me to who happened to be our lead investor. So it's this mindset of, I need to generate leads. These people are leads. I need to try and find them as best as I can. So the ways in which I found investors, so from my own network, so as I mentioned, people who I used to work for or work in the same company as, once I left and told them what I was doing, people they could potentially introduce me to. LinkedIn was really, really great, mainly because with LinkedIn, knowing that, you probably all get cold messages in some way, and most of the time, maybe you ignore them. But if they are quite tailored, actually, you can get some pretty good success with LinkedIn. You're not going to, it's unlikely you'll convert 50%, but you will still get some good progress there. So I would filter for senior individuals, kind of mid-level to senior level managers in industries that my business was in. And then I would look them up, I would look at the business, and I would tailor a very short message, but predominantly not at that point, I'm not asking them for investment, obviously. I'm talking to them to just try and build a relationship with them. That's always my go-to. Start with a lead, generate the lead, build a relationship with them, and then move into the investment conversation when appropriate. Suppliers as well. So these are customers that I've had in the past, in my previous business, even when I was working before, and relationships that I had there, again, just having a chat with them, telling them what you do, and potentially some network can come out of that as well. Some instructions can come from there too. Your own customers, professional networks as well. There is, for example, with Tectonic, because we do customer insight work, there are customer experience officers, there are customer experience groups, there are user experience groups. There are a lot of these professional networks you can become a part of to actually share knowledge and share information. There are things like Lunch Club. I haven't actually used Lunch Club yet. I've heard it's very good. But Lunch Club, I think you can connect with individuals based on your interests as well. Shaper, again, haven't used it at any great length, but I've definitely had some success stories from people who are just connecting with people and, you know, not that first message being investment, lots of other conversations to be had. Other later stage entrepreneurs, these are people that have been where you are, who kind of understand and empathize with where you're at. If you are in medtech, there are founders, successful founders who are Series A, B, or generating good revenue, have a small team that may have disposable income to invest because A, they empathize with where you are, but B, they understand your industry as well. Angel investor networks, these are groups of people who broker deals. So they may have 20 of them or 30 of them. They all put in 5, 10, 50K to deploy deals for a certain number of deals a year, going to the principal there to be able to speak to them about your business as well. Investment brokers, these are the people that get a percentage if you manage to get the investment coming through. You can speak to them. And as I mentioned, do LinkedIn, these mid-level to senior professionals who have cash, they understand your industry, they're not necessarily labeled as angel investors, but it might be something that they want to go into, or it's something they do on the side. Apply for SEIS, EIS. So this is the Seed Enterprise Investment Scheme, or the Enterprise Investment Scheme. I did find this was a really great incentive when I was on the, some of the people weren't exactly sure, but when I was able to go back to that reducing the risk point, what these schemes do is if you are SEIS registered, or you get what you call an advanced assurance letter from HMRC, you fill out some forms, basically provide a pitch deck, they get 50% income tax relief off their income tax return. And then with EIS, they get 30% income tax relief. And I think the numbers change. I think at SEIS it's 150,000 up to that amount. With EIS, it's maybe up to 3 million now, I'm not sure. But these are incentives to reduce risk, because someone who invests 15,000, actually, if they're SEIS qualified, if the company's SEIS qualified, they actually get 7,500 off their income tax. Therefore, they're actually only risking 7,500 versus the 15,000 pounds. These are some schemes that you can apply for to reduce the risk. So then going to this first call or meeting. So one of the best piece of advice I got was, if you want advice, ask for investment. If you want investment, ask for advice. So that kind of meant, if I'm going cold to someone and say, hey, I don't know you, but will you invest in my business? I'm less likely for that to happen than if I say, you know what, I'm here to build a relationship, to actually understand if they can add value to my business. Can I go and approach them to get advice? It's less intrusive. People like giving advice. And actually, you'll be able to see if there are ways for you to bring that conversation around to investment, at the appropriate time. But that first call or meeting, it was always for me around advice and understanding them and getting their views on my business. And this goes back to one of my key original points, which was build the relationship and build trust, and actually see if you like the person and if there is a connection there. Create fear of missing out through traction. So the one thing I would say is, because when I actually located a hot lead or someone who I felt, okay, they're likely to invest, I would try and leverage that and use that energy to bring on people who may not have necessarily taken it as seriously, or I hadn't actually broached that conversation yet. So with my first investor who gave that first 10K, I knew that, he was a senior guy in the organization. I knew that he knew other senior people in the organization. So I would go and set up meetings and say, yeah, I'm speaking to one of the leadership team now about investing, and then I'll just talk about my traction. I'll talk about the business. So I wouldn't say, oh, you should invest because this person is investing. I try and use it as a way to, as I kind of said, leverage the fact that I do have a warm lead to try and get more leads. And also just this fear of missing out, I communicate that through traction. So when I'm having meeting number 2 or 3, again, mainly for advice, mainly to update, I'm trying to just show the progress that we've made, and actually them seeing that, okay, under difficult circumstances or with very little resource, I'm able to show traction or show advancement. That can create this fear of, oh, do I want to miss out on this potential opportunity, especially if it's not hugely risky for me. And then finally coming down to the ask itself, right? So at what point do I communicate the ask? So because I've probably on average, it's taken 3 to 6 meetings on average, can be more, can be less, but I'd say 3 is the least I've had to do, to the point where I feel comfortable to actually say, look, this is, can we do something here? But because you've done all this upfront work of understanding the investor, updating them, all that kind of stuff, it should be a formality at that point, ideally. But once they have said, you know what, let's do something, I see myself as on a clock. I'm on a clock to get that cash in the bank as quickly as possible. So I've got to make sure I've got the appropriate documentation set up. Where possible, I actually, draft the document for them, so they just have to sign it, or just have to read it for them to be comfortable. And another thing is, you can obviously do the ask and get no's. That's happened to me many times. But the key thing when you get the no is 2 things. One, don't relinquish the relationship. You've already put in work there. It doesn't mean that they're never going to invest, but it's important to keep that relationship there, because the second thing is maybe they will know other people who might be interested. So it's definitely worth having that conversation or making that ask, because if you go in with the please invest in me, they say no, and then you say, do you know anyone else? They don't know you very well. They're not necessarily comfortable putting you in front of other people in terms of their network. But once you've built a relationship, the likelihood of that happening is significantly increased. So I would highly recommend, if it's a no for whatever reason, or it's a bit ambiguous, ask them if they know anyone else who could potentially invest. Okay, so I'll go on to a little bit around valuing your shares. This is a whole topic in itself. So again, I'll do my best. But at the early stage, it's not an exact science, meaning your valuation of your company, you're valuing your shares, it's not that, okay, it's definitely this price or it's definitely this valuation. My view is your valuation is the price investors are willing to buy in at and the price you're willing to sell at. It's effectively a matching, it's a negotiation. I've been laughed out of rooms because I've said my company at X time was worth 2 million, and they're like, you are having a laugh. But I've also put myself in a position to be prepared to be laughed at, to test and learn. But ultimately, in most situations, there are some general rules to go by. If you're early stage and you haven't got lots of revenue and you haven't got lots of recurring revenue, the market is moving all the time, but between 300K and $1 million seems to be the very early stage parts. Obviously, it can go further along, it can go less, but the point is that one of the ways for you to figure out what your valuation is to decide how much money you need, and do the numbers, as in, I need X person for this thing, I need X amount for marketing, etc. Then how much equity are you willing to give away? Which, let's say it's 20% and it's 100,000, therefore your pre-money valuation would be 500,000. So yeah, just have a think about that. It's not, this is my valuation indefinitely. It is the meeting of what an investor is willing to put in and how much equity you're willing to give away. Then there's the whole concept of pre-money versus post-money. Some of you may know this, some of you may not, but it's a very important distinction. So the pre-money valuation is the valuation of your company as you see it today before investment. So in this example, let's say based on your revenue, your intellectual property, how many customers you have, the size of your market, all these different ways for you to communicate your valuation. Let's say you say it's £350,000. And then your investment raise, the amount you're actually going to raise, is £150,000. So your post-money valuation, which is the valuation in which the equity is split, is the 350,000 plus the 150,000, which comes to 500,000 pounds or £500,000. That's your post-money valuation. So if you're able to raise this money, your company equity would be 70%. You and your founders would have the 350,000 of the 500,000, which is 17%, and the investors' equity would be 150,000 of the 500,000, which would be 30%. It's really important because what you don't want to do is give investors equity based on your pre-money valuation, because what you'll end up doing is giving away more equity than you need to. Okay, and that's pretty much it. I am doing eventually an angel investment video series where I can communicate a lot more of the detail. So if you are interested in that, I don't know when I'll get around to it, but if you are interested in that, you can go on this website here, and I'll take your email addresses, and when I have the videos, I'll send them out. Cool, so that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Nana. That was great. So much information, so much like insights, and what I really love is the personal experiences and the personal anecdotes that you give as well, because it really just kind of brings it to life.
Yeah,
so
no,
I'm not sure if you're able to like, see the Q&A questions, or do you want me to?
I think I can. I'm just not sure what. Okay, so I think I've got one from Rajeshwari, I think. So I don't know if this was for the one before, actually. Maybe
so I think it started from about. So yeah, there was one on traction which already covered, so probably no need to touch on that again. But one question that came up was, if your business has been impacted by COVID and therefore you can't launch or don't have traction, how do you communicate this with investors?
Okay, so if your business has been impacted and therefore you can't launch or don't have traction, how do you communicate this with investors? Well, I think that immediately my mind wouldn't be going to communicating that with investors as much. I think my mind would be, based on the relationships that you either have, or if you're already about to start conversations with investment but your business is having some trouble. I personally think the best way to do that is to be open with them about A, what those challenges are, and B, as founders, how you're going to try and solve those problems. So if they're market issues, if they're customer issues, if they're team issues, whatever those are. I remember when my investors in my current business, Tectonic, as soon as COVID hit, I put together a COVID plan deck and I went to them and I communicated exactly what my plan is to get their insight. So I would recommend that you do the same. You get together with your team, or if it's yourself, understand what it is that you're going to do, and then make sure that you communicate that with them, be open with them, and also get advice from them as well. But I think my investors definitely appreciate the fact they didn't have to ask me to do it. I just went ahead and put my best foot forward to do that.
Great. Oh, amazing answer. And we had another question around when you initially messaged these managers to chat to them, what is kind of like the ask that you have? Is it, I just want to chat to you, get to know you, or?
So a good example is I recently messaged a fairly senior lady in Vodafone, and this wasn't for investment, but the same thing applies. Is I basically noticed either something she put on LinkedIn that kind of linked my business and her together. So it was I wasn't connected to her at the time, and it was kind of one of those secondary messages you see on the feed. I just said, "Hey, hope it's okay to reach out. I noticed you said this. This was my take on it. It'd be really great to have a conversation to see if we can help each other." That's generally how I start the relationship, because A, it's not about me getting something from them. It's about, is there something mutual we can do to help each other? And it's not a standard sales message of, hey, we're a tech company that do this and this. It's actually putting something bespoke in there so they understand that it's tailored as well. So that's an example if that's useful.
Sweet. And there was another interesting question. So do we account for founders' salary in the ask?
So yes, but I do it in a different way, let's say. So for example, I have been rejected from investment because of team salaries, because they basically say, "Oh, I don't want to fund your lifestyle." They weren't outrageous salaries, but some people have that view. So what I tend to do is, for example, I know that there's a product management line that I need to spend money on product. So what I would do is I would put any technical fee or technical any money that I need to spend on technical things there, but I'd also put the salary of the product manager in there if I needed a product manager. So I'm actually not spending £80,000, £20,000 each for 4 people. This is the spend on product management. If you want me to achieve my milestones or my goals in product management, this is how much it's going to cost. Same with marketing, same with everything. So that's generally how I get around that, because I definitely, it's unfortunate because there's a lot of privilege in that view of, oh, I'm not going to fund your lifestyle. But, if you're a founder, people need to eat, people need to pay rent, you're taking a risk as well. So that's how I get around it personally.
Great, thank you. So a couple more questions. One is, so this is a very specific question, so I'll try and make it a bit more anonymous, but so somebody asks, is offering 7% for a £30,000 investment, which comes with 3-month tailored acceleration, a good deal?
Oh, so is that if a £7,000?
Yeah, so you ask for £30,000, you're willing to give up 7% equity, but part of the support you get is a 3-month tailored accelerator.
Okay. It depends. I mean, it mostly depends on your own goals. So I would say that it depends on where your business is at the time. So if you are, if you are significantly revenue generating, but this accelerator has a network, or it's given you certain things that are of value, then yeah, I don't think it's as black and white as is it a good deal or a bad deal. If someone offered me that, but they said, I'm going to get you to, I'm going to be able to get you to the top 5 people in your industry, then yeah, it's better to have something than nothing, of value. So I think it's too difficult for me to say is it a good deal or a bad deal, but I would say that it depends very much on your own circumstances and understanding the why you're raising money and what that offering is in respect to that.
Sure. And one on, so I think you might have touched on this already, but did you know any of your investors personally prior to them investing in the business?
Yes, some of them I did. So by personally, I mean, for example, that guy that used to work in the company that I used to work in, he was the guy, I used to work for the CEO of the company, and he did my psychological profile. You have to go through this very intense psychological assessment before you get to work for the leadership team. And yeah, I knew him, but not from a friendship perspective or anything like that. It was pretty much a job transactional perspective. And then during my time, we had different meetings, but really about the work. It was only when he heard that I was leaving that I was able to take that as an opportunity to get to know him personally. Other investors, so these would have been people, I'm just trying to think of some people. So another one was someone who I used to go to uni with that I didn't know very well, but I saw his kind of elevation in LinkedIn in his professional profile. So reached out to them as well. So some people I knew of, some people I knew, but didn't class them as investors until I put them on this sheet and decided to kind of go through them. But I would say that I would invest in time to personally get to know some of these people. It really, really helps.
For sure. So we have a couple of minutes left, and there's one other question that I thought would be worthwhile touching on. So this is again a quite specific question. The broad question is, what kind of traction do angel investors look for? But the specific one is, so he runs an edtech company. They have an MVP that people are actively using. However, they need to scale in order to integrate the AI that they need for it. Is an MVP enough to demonstrate traction?
Yeah, so again, unfortunately, it does depend on the investor, but I would say that broadly speaking, what they're really looking for on an overarching level is, well, to me, three things. It's proof there's a market, and ideally that's through customers, could be through signups, could be through revenue, but proof there's a market. Proof you have the team to be able to actually go and execute on it. And then proof that you've been able to identify challenges that may come and you're the right person to overcome those challenges. In terms of your question, I think it's more in the first bit, and your MVP is just a conduit to that proof of market. So having an MVP by itself isn't necessarily a qualifier. It does show that you have the wherewithal and the resources and the way to figure out to have a product that could help you get customers. But ultimately, if you go back to that view of it's a risk-taking, a risky venture, and you're trying to reduce that risk, having the product makes it less risky. Having some customers makes it less risky. Having revenue makes it less risky. So ideally, it's going to be more expensive for them to buy in if you have a product, you have revenue, and you have some customers, and you actually know who that customer is as well. It's not just one person here, one person there. It's I understand who my customer is. So it's too difficult to say in your particular instance, but broadly that's what they're looking for. You can go with just an MVP, but they are without customers, but they're more likely to have to want to believe in you and your team and the execution rather than the metrics that they may need to show there's a proof of market. Hopefully that makes sense.
Sure. Thank you so much, Nana. Cool. So that was the last question you had, and we're bang on time, just a minute to 12. So again, thank you, Nana, for your amazing session. Like I was saying, I saw you run a similar one before. I was like, this is amazing, so like impactful, like packed with so much information that's like actionable. So yeah, really appreciate you joining.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good luck, everyone, and yeah, good to see you. I'm sure I'll see you in the community over the next few months.
For sure. Take care.
Nice one. See ya. Bye.